"I told you not to expect anything from me," my daughter said. Then I saw her in-laws unwrap a luxury vacation while I got socks. I walked out, and the next day, I did something that made she call me in shock. I stood in my own kitchen at midnight, scissors in my hand, cutting up the credit card that had my name on it, the one I'd been using for 3 years to pay for my son's life. My hands weren't shaking. That's what surprised me most, because earlier that night at Christmas dinner, Ryan had looked me dead in the eyes and said in front of everyone, "Dad, I told you not to expect anything from me." And something inside me went very, very quiet. Not broken, not defeated, decided. If you're watching this from Chicago, Dallas, or a little town nobody's ever heard of, drop it in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. And if no one's ever told you that you're allowed to stop giving, stay with me. Subscribe, because this one's going to change the way you think about love. I need to tell you something that took me 65 years to finally understand. Love is not the same thing as sacrifice. I know that sounds simple, maybe even obvious, but when you've spent the better part of your life being someone's father, someone's husband, someone's safety net, when your entire identity has been built around what you can give and do and fix and carry, those 9 words hit you like cold water to the face at 3 in the morning. Love is not the same thing as sacrifice. I had to learn it the hard way. My name is Frank Coleman. I'm 65 years old. I live in a modest house on the north side of Columbus, Ohio. And 18 months ago I was invisible. Not literally, of course. People could see me. They could find me when they needed something cooked, something paid for, something handled. But the real me, the man who had dreams and preferences and feelings, and a whole interior life that had nothing to do with being useful, that man had completely disappeared. And the worst part, I had let it happen. I want to be honest with you right from the start, because this story doesn't have a clean villain. Ryan, my son, is not a monster. He's a complicated person who made a lot of choices I enabled for too long, and I, Frank Coleman, made choices too. I told myself I was being selfless. I told myself it was love. I told myself that's what fathers do. But somewhere along the way, I stopped being his father and started being his resource. And I didn't even notice, until a Christmas night, when he handed me a plastic bag with a clearance coffee mug inside it, and then told me I had no right to feel hurt about it. But let me back up. Because to understand that night, you have to understand what my life looked like in the 3 years before it. My wife Margaret died in the spring of 2019. Pancreatic cancer. Diagnosed in February, gone by April. We barely had time to process the word cancer before we were planning a funeral. Margaret and I had been married for 39 years. She was a quiet woman. The kind who fixed things with her own 2 hands, who never said I love you more than twice a year, but showed it in about 400 other ways. She made my coffee every morning. She reached for my hand during movies without looking at me. She remembered things I'd said months ago and brought them back up like they mattered. When she died, I didn't just lose a wife. I lost the structure of my entire life. For about 6 months after the funeral, I just floated. I'd wake up in the morning and have no idea what to do with myself. The house felt too big. The silence felt aggressive. I'd go to the grocery store and stand in front of the cereal aisle for 15 minutes trying to remember why I was there. Ryan called regularly during those first months. He checked in, he invited me to dinner, he brought the grandkids over on Sundays. And those afternoons were the only times I felt like myself again, like I had a place in the world, a function, a reason. I see now what was happening. I was grieving, and I was looking for a way to matter again. And Ryan, whether he understood it or not, offered me exactly that. "Dad, would you be able to help us out this month? We're a little short." That was the first time, October 2019. Margaret had been gone for 6 months. I said yes, of course. I had savings. I had Margaret's life insurance. I had more than enough. And they were struggling. And what kind of father says no to his child? It was $800 that month. I didn't think anything of it. By January 2020, I was paying $1,147 a month toward their car payment. Ryan's wife, Melissa, worked in real estate. When the market was good, they lived very well, but the market had been unpredictable, and they'd made lifestyle choices based on the good years. Choices that didn't adjust when the lean years came. The car was a Mercedes, a beautiful one. A car that 2 people with an inconsistent income had absolutely no business owning. I remember sitting across from Ryan at his kitchen table the day he asked me to help with the payment. He was wearing a nice pullover I didn't recognize. Their kitchen had been renovated the previous year. New countertops, new appliances, new everything. The house was beautiful. Melissa had a slow quarter. We don't want to fall behind on the car because it'll hurt her credit, and she needs her credit clean for the business. How much is the payment? $11.47. I stared at the marble countertop. I thought about asking whether they had considered selling the car. I thought about pointing out that my own car was a 2014 Honda I'd driven for 6 years. I thought about a lot of things. I'll take care of it this month. Thank you, Dad. You're a lifesaver. That phrase should have been a warning sign. Lifesaver. That's what you call someone when you're drowning. I was beginning to wonder who had pushed them into the water in the first place, but I didn't say any of that. I just opened my phone and made the transfer. I want to tell you about a Tuesday in March, about a year into this arrangement. I was at the grocery store standing in the checkout line with my own cart, and I was doing the math in my head the way I always did then, calculating what I had left after the transfers that had already gone out that month. Car payment $11.47. Private school tuition for my 2 grandchildren, Lily and Jack. $2,200 combined. Ryan had told me when he first asked, like that word combined was supposed to make it smaller. Utility backup, $340, because their bill had been higher than expected. Incidentals, the word Ryan used for the random charges he texted me about throughout the month, the ones that were never predictable but were somehow always urgent, $280 so far that month. I was adding those numbers in my head, and I was also looking at the items in my cart: generic brand cereal, store brand pasta, the markdown bread that was a day from its sell-by date. I was doing those things simultaneously, running the math on what I'd given my son that month and watching myself buy markdown bread. And I didn't feel anything. That's the part that haunts me now. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel sad. I didn't even feel the contradiction. I had just normalized it. This was my life now. They took, I adjusted, I gave some more. The man behind me in line was talking on his phone. He was laughing about something. He sounded free. I paid for my groceries and drove home. There was a period, I think it was the fall of 2020, when things between Ryan and Melissa got rocky. I didn't know the details. Ryan never told me much about his marriage, and I had learned not to ask, because when I did, he'd go quiet in a way that made me feel like I'd crossed a line. So I only knew what I could observe: that some weeks they barely spoke to each other at dinner, that Melissa started working late more often than made sense, that Ryan called me more frequently, sometimes just to talk, sometimes struggling without quite explaining why. During those months, I was more than a financial resource. I was also an emotional one. He'd call me at 10 or 11 at night. "Are you busy?" "Never too busy for you. I just feel so, I don't know, like I'm doing everything wrong." "You're not doing everything wrong. You have to say that, you're my dad. I'm saying it because it's true." We'd talk for an hour, sometimes longer, about his childhood, about things he wished had been different, about his fears for his kids. I listened. I held space. I asked questions. I said the right things. And sometimes after we hung up, I'd sit in my quiet house and think, he doesn't ask me how I'm doing. Not once in this conversation. But then I'd tell myself I was being selfish. He was the one struggling. He was the one who needed support. That was my job. That was what I was for. Lily was 8 and Jack was 6 the first time Ryan dropped them at my house without calling first. I was in the middle of something, I honestly don't even remember what, which is its own kind of sad, when I heard the front door open. I'd given Ryan a key years ago for emergencies. This was apparently an emergency. "Dad, I'm leaving the kids. I have an appointment and I completely forgot, and I have to go." He was already halfway back out the door before I could respond. "Ryan, are you okay? But when will you? I'll text you." The door closed. Lily was standing in my hallway holding a backpack, looking up at me with those big brown eyes. Jack had already found his way to the living room and was turning on the television. "Hi, Grandpa." "Hi, sweetheart." I bent down and hugged her tight, and I meant it. I love those kids. I love them still. "Are you hungry?" "Dad said we already ate, but Jack lied and didn't finish his." "Well, I think I have some apples and peanut butter." I made them snacks. I helped Lily with her homework. I watched 2 episodes of whatever animated show Jack was obsessed with at the time. I gave them baths. I put them to bed in the guest room because Ryan's text, when it finally came at 8:47 p.m., said, "Running late, can they just stay?" They stayed. I didn't sleep well that night, not because of the kids but because I kept thinking about that phrase, "Can they just stay?" Not, "Is that okay, Dad?" Not, "I know this is a lot, I'm so sorry." Just, "Can they just stay?" As if my schedule, my energy, my own needs, as if all of that was a given, as if I was a service, not a person. And I pushed the thought away. I told myself I was being dramatic. But thoughts like that don't disappear when you push them. They just go underground. By the time December 2021 rolled around, I had been quietly holding up a significant portion of Ryan and Melissa's life for over 2 years. The exact number is something I calculated later. On that night I mentioned at the beginning, the night with the scissors, and the credit card. In 26 months, I had transferred a total of $94,400 to my son's family. Nearly $100,000. I had done it without complaint, without keeping score, or so I told myself. I had done it because that's what love looked like from where I was standing. Because Margaret was gone, and my grandchildren needed stability, and my son was struggling, and I had the means to help. I told myself that every single month, but here's what I didn't let myself examine too closely. I was also lonely. I was also hurting. I was also a 65-year-old man who had lost the love of his life and had never fully processed that grief, because the moment the real, raw, shapeless grief tried to surface, there was always something else to handle, a payment to make, a call to take, a grandchild crisis to absorb. My grief had no room to breathe, and neither did I. I arrived at Ryan's house on December 23rd with 4 bags of groceries I had paid for myself. This was not unusual. I always brought food when I came to holiday dinners. It was just how it worked. I contributed, they hosted, everyone was fed. What was unusual was how I felt walking up to the door that evening. I had been feeling off for weeks, unsettled in a way I couldn't name, like something was waiting to break but hadn't found the right moment. Ryan met me at the door with a distracted smile. "Oh good, you're here. Can you start on the green beans? The oven's already going for the roast." Not, "Hi Dad, come in, let me take those bags." Just, "Can you start on the green beans?" Of course. I carried the bags to the kitchen and started unpacking. Melissa was in the living room watching something on her phone. She looked up when I passed. "Hey Frank." "Melissa." She looked back at her phone. I started on the green beans. For the next 3 hours, I cooked. I washed dishes as I went so the kitchen wouldn't be a disaster later. I arranged the appetizer tray. I checked the roast. I set the table because no one else was doing it. Ryan moved through the house like he was the director of a production I was staffing. "Dad, can you make sure the kids are washed up? And I think there's more wine in the garage. Dad, where did I put the good napkins, do you know? Dad, the sauce needs stirring." I did all of it without being asked twice, without complaint. And here is the thing I need you to understand. I was not angry in those 3 hours. I was not resentful, not consciously. I had done this so many times that it felt normal. This was just how things worked in our family. I was the helper, that was my role. I had forgotten, or maybe never let myself know, that I was also the guest. Melissa's parents arrived at 5:30, Gary and Susan Prescott. I had met them perhaps half a dozen times over the years. Polite people, quiet. The kind of couple who looked coordinated without trying. Matching, tasteful colors, good shoes, easy smiles. I was standing at the kitchen sink when they came in, rinsing the colander, and I heard the front door open and the shift in the house, the way the energy changed when people you're performing for arrive. "Gary, Susan, oh my gosh, come in, come in." Ryan's voice was different. Warmer, more alive. Melissa materialized from the couch, like she'd been waiting for a reason to stand up. There were hugs, exclamations about the drive, compliments on how good everyone looked. "Let me take those." That was Melissa reaching for Susan's coat. I dried my hands on a dish towel and stepped to the kitchen doorway. I watched Gary's coat get taken too. I watched everyone settle into the living room, heard the sound of wine glasses being filled, heard laughter over something Gary said. Ryan walked past the kitchen without looking in. I went back to the sink. There's a particular kind of loneliness that is very different from being alone. Being alone, genuinely alone in your own home, in your own space, can feel peaceful, it can feel chosen. But being lonely in a room full of people who should see you, people you love, people whose lives you have quietly funded and supported and sustained for years, that kind of loneliness is a different creature entirely. It has teeth. I finished the dishes. I carried the food to the table. I called everyone to dinner. And at the table, Gary told a story about a trip he and Susan had taken to Portugal the previous spring. And everyone listened and laughed. And Susan talked about wanting to go back. And Ryan said, "You absolutely should." And through all of it, I sat at one end of the table and refilled my own water glass, and tried to think of the last time anyone had asked me about a trip I wanted to take. I couldn't come up with one. After dinner, while I was in the kitchen loading the dishwasher alone, obviously, the gift exchange happened in the living room. I heard it more than I saw it, paper tearing, exclamations. "Oh, you didn't have to." the particular pitch of someone genuinely delighted by something. "Oh, Ryan, Melissa, we can't accept this." That was Susan. "You absolutely can. You've been talking about Portugal since last Christmas. Go enjoy it." Ryan's voice, warm and generous and pleased with himself. More exclamations, more laughter. I closed the dishwasher and wiped down the counter. Then Ryan appeared in the kitchen doorway. "Dad, come open your gift." I followed him to the living room. Everyone was settled and smiling. There was a small bag on the coffee table, the kind of bag you grab at the checkout line when you've forgotten to wrap something. I sat down and picked it up. There was pink tissue paper inside. I moved it aside. A coffee mug, white with a faded floral design, the kind of thing you'd find in the 70% off bin after a holiday. And beneath it, a pair of socks. Gray with small hearts on them, tag still on, $3.99. I held them both in my hands for a moment. I did not cry. I want to be clear about that. I was not dramatic. I did not make a scene. I sat very still, and I felt something move through me. Quiet, terrible, clarifying, and I set the mug and the socks down on my knee and looked up. Ryan was watching me, and in his expression I saw it, just for a second before he covered it. He was watching to see if I'd say anything, braced for it. I didn't say anything. But my face must have shown something, some flicker of what was happening inside me, because Ryan straightened up and said, "I told you not to expect anything from me." The room got very quiet. Gary looked at his wine glass. Susan found something to study on the floor. Melissa shifted in her chair. I looked at my son. He looked back at me, not unkind, not cruel. Something worse than either of those things. Certain. He was certain he was right. Certain that the reminder excused the reality. Certain that because he had technically warned me sometime, somewhere, in some conversation I barely remembered, the imbalance between a Portugal vacation for the in-laws and a clearance mug for the man who had paid $94,000 into his family was explained. I picked up the mug and the socks. "Thank you for dinner." I set them back in the bag. "I'm going to head home." "Dad, it's early. I'm tired. Good night, everyone." I got my coat from the closet by myself. I got my keys. I walked to the door. No one followed me. I drove home in the dark, and I was very calm, and I did not put on the radio, and I did not cry, not yet. I just drove, and somewhere on the highway heading north toward a quiet house that was all mine, something in me made a decision so fundamental and complete that I felt it physically, a releasing. Like a door closing on a room I had been locked in for years. I was done being the man they called when they needed something. It was time, past time, to remember who I was before I became useful. And the first thing I was going to do when I got home was cancel every single automatic payment with my name on it. It was almost midnight when I sat down at my kitchen table with my laptop. I made a cup of tea, real tea, the good kind I'd been saving, the kind I never made for just myself because it felt like too much trouble for one person. And I opened my banking app. I looked at the recurring transfers. Car payment, $11.47. School, $2,200. Utilities backup, automatic, variable, averaging $3.40. And then the discretionary transfers. The ones I'd set up after the third or fourth time Ryan called in a panic about something unexpected, just so the money would be there when he needed it. A buffer, a cushion, a safety net with my name stitched into it. $500 a month, just waiting. I sat there for a long time. I thought about Margaret. I thought about what she would say if she could see what the last 2 years had looked like. Margaret, who had loved Ryan fiercely, but never once let him treat her like a subordinate, who would have said something long before it got to a Portugal vacation and a clearance mug. I thought about the version of me who had existed before all of this. The man who had his own interests, his own friends, his own sense of himself as a complete person rather than an extension of his son's needs. I thought about the grocery store, and the markdown bread, and the math I did in my head every month. Then I picked up the scissors from the drawer by the sink, the nice ones, the kitchen shears, and I took out the credit card, the one I'd gotten because it gave cash back on groceries, the one I'd been using to cover the incidentals Ryan texted about. I cut it in half. Then I went back to the laptop, and one by one, I canceled every automatic transfer. It took about 12 minutes. 12 minutes to undo 2 years. When it was done, I closed the laptop, drank the rest of my tea, and sat in the quiet of my own kitchen at midnight. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, I felt like myself. I didn't know what came next. I didn't know how Ryan would react, or what it would cost me, or whether I'd lose access to my grandchildren, or whether this quiet decision made in the middle of the night would end up being the thing that finally broke us. I just knew that the man who had walked into that house with 4 bags of groceries, and spent 3 hours in a kitchen while his son entertained guests, and gave his in-laws a vacation as a gift, and gave his own father a clearance mug, a man who had given nearly $100,000, that man was not going to be me anymore. My name is Frank Coleman, I am 65 years old. And that night, that quiet, unremarkable Tuesday night in December, was the first night of the rest of my life. The next morning, I woke up at 6:14 without an alarm. That hadn't happened in years. Usually I slept in fragments, waking at 2, at 4, lying in the dark, running numbers and replanning things that hadn't gone wrong yet. The anxiety of someone who has made themselves responsible for too much will do that to a person. It finds you even in sleep. But that morning, I woke up clean, like something had been washed out of me overnight. I lay in bed for a full minute just noticing that, the quiet, the light coming through the curtains, the absence of that low-grade hum of dread that had become so routine I'd stopped hearing it until now, when it was suddenly gone. I got up. I made coffee, real coffee, the slow kind with the pour-over Margaret had bought me 3 Christmases before she died. The one I almost never used anymore because it felt like too much ceremony for one person. I used it that morning. I sat at the kitchen table with both hands around the mug, and I thought, today something is going to happen. I didn't know when. I just knew that what I'd done the night before, those 12 minutes, the scissors, the transfers, I knew it was going to land somewhere. And I knew the landing was not going to be quiet. My phone rang at 8:47. I looked at the screen. Ryan. I let it ring. Not because I was afraid of him, not because I didn't have the words. I let it ring because for the first time in 2 years I wanted to choose when the conversation happened. Not when he needed it to happen. When I was ready. It went to voicemail. He called back 4 minutes later. I let that one ring too. The third call came at 9, and by then I had finished my coffee and rinsed the mug and was standing at the kitchen window looking at the backyard, at the bare December garden that Margaret had planted, and I had barely touched since she died. And I picked up. Dad, the car payment didn't go through. Not hello. Not Dad, are you okay? Just straight to the point, voice tight, already on the edge of something. I know. Silence. A particular kind of silence. The kind that has shape and weight, and is very clearly someone recalibrating. Happened with the account? Nothing happened with the account. I canceled the transfer. Another silence, longer this time. You what? I canceled all of them. Ryan, the car, the school payments, the utility backup, the discretionary account, all of it. A pause, then sharp. Is this about last night? Because I really thought we were past the gift thing. Dad, I explained. You didn't explain anything. You told me I had no right to feel hurt. That's different. I just meant that I told you ahead of time not to expect. You told me not to expect anything from you, as your father, as your guest, as the man who spent 3 hours cooking your Christmas dinner and watched you give your in-laws a vacation to Portugal. The silence that followed was different from the others. This one felt fragile, like something stretched to its limit. That's not fair. We've known Gary and Susan for... I'm not talking about Gary and Susan, Ryan. I'm talking about what I realized last night. And I'm not angry. I want you to hear that. I am not calling you screaming. I'm telling you calmly that I made a decision, and the decision is that I'm done contributing financially to your household. You can't just... His voice cracked and I heard it, that particular fracture that meant he was genuinely alarmed, not sad. The car payment is due in 4 days. If it doesn't go through, it goes on Melissa's credit record. It'll affect everything. You know how important her credit is for the business. I do know. You've explained it to me many times. Then why? Because it's not my car, Ryan. The line went quiet again. Because it was never my car. It was never my school bill or my utility expense. Those are yours. And for 2 years I've been paying them like they were mine. And at some point last night I asked myself why, and I didn't have a good answer. The answer is that you're our family. His voice had shifted, harder now. The answer is that families help each other. Yes, they do. And when you've needed help, I have given it for 2 years without complaint. I gave it. Do you know how much I've given you in the last 2 years? Nothing. $94,000, Ryan. Still nothing. I calculated it last night, nearly $100,000. And I didn't give it because I wanted to hold it over you. I gave it because I loved you. And I thought that was what love looked like. But last night, when you handed me that bag, it was just a gift. Dad, it didn't mean, when you handed me that bag and told me not to expect anything from you, I realized that you've stopped thinking of me as your father. You think of me as a resource. And resources don't have feelings to hurt. Resources just keep giving until they run out. A sound came through the phone, something almost like a gasp, but swallowed before it could become one. That's not true. Then tell me the last time you asked me how I was doing. Not to be polite, Ryan, not as a way into asking for something, the last time you genuinely wanted to know. Nothing. Tell me the last time you called me, not because you needed something, just because you wanted to talk. Still nothing. Tell me one thing about my life right now. What's been on my mind lately, what I've been struggling with since your mother died. One thing. The silence on the other end was no longer fragile, it was hollow. You don't know, I said. And that's okay. That's something we can fix if you want to. But I cannot keep writing checks to your life while being invisible in it. I won't do that. So what does that mean? His voice was very small now. I hadn't heard that voice in a long time. What does it mean for us? It means I love you. It means I'm your father. It means if you call me because you're scared or hurting or need someone to talk to, I will always pick up. But it means the financial arrangement is over. You and Melissa need to figure out your own expenses. That's not cruelty. That's just the way things should have been all along. Another beat of silence, and then the wall came back up. I can't believe you're doing this right before Christmas. Christmas was yesterday, Ryan. You know what I mean. The timing is what it is. Fine. His voice went flat, the way it did when he was shutting down instead of dealing with something. Fine, Dad. If that's what you want, that's what I want. I hope you understand what this is going to do to our family. I held the phone a little tighter. I think the question worth asking, I said, is what the last 2 years have done to it. He hung up. I stood at the kitchen window for a long moment, phone in my hand, looking at Margaret's garden. A bird landed on the bare rose bush, and sat there for a second, then flew away. My heart was pounding, but I did not pick up the phone and call him back. 4 days passed. I'd be lying if I said they were easy. They weren't. I went through the full range of things a person goes through when they've made a decision that they know is right but can't yet feel is right. The first day was mostly adrenaline, a buzzing, strange energy, the kind you get after you've done something you can't undo. I cleaned the house. I reorganized the garage. I drove to the library and walked through the stacks for an hour just to feel the particular piece of a place where no one needs anything from you. The second day, the doubt came in. It came in at 2 a.m, the way doubt always does when you're flat on your back in the dark and there's nothing to distract you from your own thoughts. What if the car gets repossessed? What if Lily and Jack have to leave their school? What if Melissa's credit gets destroyed? And the business collapses, and it's because of what I did. I lay there, and I let those thoughts run. Because I've found over the years that the only way through that kind of spiraling is to actually follow the thoughts to their end instead of running from them. So I followed them. The car gets repossessed. Ryan and Melissa get a less expensive car. They manage. The kids change schools, public school. It's not a tragedy unless Ryan treats it as one. Lily and Jack will adapt. Kids adapt. Melissa's credit takes a hit. She figures out how to manage her business within the reality of their actual income, like most people do. None of it was ideal, none of it was painless. But none of it was the catastrophe that 2 a.m. brain wanted to make it. And more importantly, none of it was my responsibility to prevent. I had carried that weight for 2 years. I had reshaped my entire retirement, my entire financial landscape, my entire daily life, around preventing discomfort for a household of adults who had never once asked me if I was okay. The third day, I called my daughter. Rachel is 3 years younger than Ryan. She lives in Cincinnati, about 2.5 hours away. We are not the kind of close that involves daily calls or constant contact, but we are the kind of close that matters. The kind where you can go 3 weeks without talking and pick up exactly where you left off. I had not told Rachel about the financial arrangement with Ryan, partly because Ryan had asked me not to, which I had honored, even though it meant carrying the secret alone, partly because I was ashamed, not of giving the money, but of how invisible I had allowed myself to become in the process. Dad, her voice when she picked up, just my name but warm in the way Rachel always was. How was Christmas? It was interesting, can I tell you something? Always. So I told her, not everything, not every number, not every instance, but enough. The car, the school, the groceries I'd been buying for myself at marked-down prices while covering a Mercedes payment, the mug and the socks, the 11 words that had changed everything. She was quiet for a long time after I finished. Why didn't you tell me? Because Ryan asked me not to. Dad, I know. You should have. A pause, I could hear her working through it. How long has this been going on? About 2 years? 2 years. Not a question, more like she was placing it somewhere in her understanding of the world, where it required more space than she'd anticipated. Okay, how are you doing now today? I'm okay, I think I'm okay. You canceled everything, all of it. He said it without hesitation, not, good for you, or, I think that was probably the right call, or any of the hedging that people do when they're trying to be supportive without taking a position, just good, clear, and unambiguous. Something in my chest loosened. He's going to be angry, I said. He's probably already angry. He called it selfish. Of course he did. Dad, look. Her voice was steady and careful, the way it got when she was saying something she'd thought through. Ryan loves you, I believe that, but Ryan has also spent a long time treating you like a backup plan instead of a person, and that's not okay. It was never okay. And it's not okay for you to fund a life that doesn't include you, not really include you. He's going through a hard time. He's been going through a hard time for 2 years, according to you, and during that time he's taken $94,000 from you and given you a $5 mug. The number out loud in Rachel's voice hit differently than it had in my own head. I'm not trying to make you feel stupid, she said. You are not stupid. You are a father who loves his kids so much he would do almost anything. That's not a flaw, but somebody had to stop this. And since Ryan wasn't going to, I'm glad you did. We talked for another hour about nothing and everything, about Cincinnati, about her kids, about a trip she and her husband were planning, about what I wanted my next year to actually look like. That last question caught me off guard. What do you want, Dad? Not for Ryan, not for the grandkids, for yourself. I didn't have an answer right away. That's how long it had been since anyone had asked. I don't know, I admitted. I'll have to think about it. Think about it, and then do it. On December 28th, 5 days after Christmas, Ryan showed up at my front door. I was not expecting him. It was 11 in the morning, midweek, gray and cold outside. I heard the knock and went to the door and found him standing on my porch, in a coat I hadn't seen before, hair a little disheveled. Something in his face that I recognized but couldn't quite name. I stepped back and let him in. He walked past me into the living room and stood there for a moment, looking around. He'd been in this house hundreds of times. He grew up partly in this house, but in that moment he was standing in it like he wasn't sure of the furniture. I wanted to talk. Okay. Melissa and we had a conversation, after our call. He paused. She's frustrated, she's worried about the car, about the payments. I understand. She wants to know if there's any possibility of, no. He blinked. I think he'd expected me to at least let him finish the sentence. Ryan, I'm not going to restart the transfers. I've made that decision and it's not changing. If that's what you came here to ask, I want to save us both some time. I didn't only come to ask that. He sat down on the couch, not the spot he usually picked, the end nearest the window where he liked to stretch his legs out. He sat in the middle, upright, which was not Ryan's usual posture in this house. I came because, Dad, I've been up every night this week. Tell me. I keep going over what you said on the phone, the question you asked about the last time I asked you how you were doing. He stopped. His jaw worked. I can't think of an answer. I sat in the armchair across from him. I didn't say that to scare you, he said, but it scares me. I don't want to be the kind of person who doesn't know when his own father is struggling. But you didn't know. I didn't let myself know, he said, it quietly but precisely, like he'd practiced the difference. I think those are different things. That surprised me. I want to be honest about that. I had come into this conversation prepared for the other Ryan, the one with the flat voice and the defensive posture. I had not expected this. Okay, I said. Tell me more. I think I convinced myself that because you were helping us, because the money was there and you kept sending it, that you were fine, that you had everything handled, that you were Frank Coleman, and Frank Coleman always had everything handled. You were not fine. I know that now. You were a 64-year-old widower who lost his wife and his whole life structure in the same month. And instead of grieving, you started paying our car payment. He flinched. I'm not saying that to hurt you. I'm saying it because it's true. And because if we're going to talk about this honestly, you need to understand what was actually happening on my side of things. I didn't think about your side. No, you didn't. Silence, not the tense, defensive kind, something more open. I told myself that you were choosing to help us, that you had the money and you wanted to, and it was your choice. He looked at the window for a moment. And that was true, but it was also a convenient thing to believe. It let me take without feeling like I was taking. A quick look at me, raw. Yes. He sat with that for a moment. The mug, he said finally. The mug, I know how it looked. I knew when I wrapped it. I kept telling myself that you said gifts didn't matter, that you always said that, that was a lie I told so you wouldn't feel bad. Not a license. He nodded, quick and tight. The vacation was Melissa's idea originally, for her parents. And then it escalated. And then I was thinking about your gift, and it was the week before Christmas, and I was busy, and I grabbed something. He paused. I knew when I put it in the bag, I knew it wasn't enough. Then why did you tell me not to expect anything? The question hung between us. He was quiet for a long moment. Because I knew if I didn't say it first, you'd say something, and I didn't want to feel bad about it in front of everyone. The honesty of that landed somewhere hard in my chest, not because it was cruel, because it was small. Because the reason he had said those 11 words, the words that had split something open in me and sent me to the kitchen table at midnight with scissors in my hand, the reason was small and human and ordinary. He didn't want to feel bad. He'd rather I felt bad than him. And he had done that automatically, without thinking it through. Because somewhere along the way he had learned that my feelings were the expendable ones. The ones that could be managed or dismissed or shelved for later, because I would handle it. Because I always handled it. Because I was the resource. I need you to understand something, I said. Not because I want an apology, though I'll take one if you have one, but because this matters. He was watching me. You are my son. I will love you until I die. But love is not a blank check. I am allowed to need things. I am allowed to hurt when I'm hurt. I am allowed to say that a relationship where I give everything and am expected to want nothing is not a relationship. It's an arrangement. And I don't want an arrangement with you. I want a father and a son. His eyes were wet. He blinked hard. I want that too. Then we have to build it. We have to start over, almost. Because what we've had, it isn't that. I know. I looked at him, my son, 41 years old, sitting in my living room with wet eyes and disheveled hair, looking more like himself than he had in a long time, more uncertain, more real, less the polished, managed version of himself that he usually presented to the world. Are you willing to do that? I asked. Yes. It means honesty both ways. It means I get to tell you when I'm struggling and you actually listen. It means you don't drop the kids on me without asking. It means we're equals. Not me serving you and you tolerating me. I know. And it means the money is over. That part of our relationship is done. Whatever you and Melissa need to sort out financially, you sort out. That's not me abandoning you. That's me treating you like an adult. He nodded once, solidly. Okay. We sat there for a moment in the quiet, then he said, the car. We're going to have to give it back, I think. We can't make the payments on our own. That's hard. Yeah. A small, dry breath, not quite a laugh. It really is. But you'll manage. I hope so. You will. You're capable, Ryan. Much more capable than you've let yourself be because I kept stepping in before you had to find out. He looked at me. Something in his face shifted, not hurt, not defensive, more like recognition. The slow arrival of a thing that has been true for a while but hasn't been said out loud until now. That's probably fair, he said. We had coffee. Not a long visit, an hour, maybe a little more. We talked the way we used to talk a long time ago, before the roles calcified. He told me things about his marriage, real things, the uncertainty and the friction and the things he was afraid of. I told him about the grief I'd been carrying since Margaret died, the loneliness, the way I'd filled all that empty space with his needs, because it was easier than sitting with my own. He listened, actual listening, not waiting for me to stop so he could respond, not looking at his phone, not redirecting toward his own experience. Listening. It felt like something beginning, but I want to be honest with you, because this is a true story. And true stories don't resolve cleanly in a single afternoon. When he left, when I heard his car pull out of the driveway, and the sound faded down the street, I stood in the quiet living room and felt something complicated and mixed. Hope, yes, something warming in my chest that I recognized as the specific warmth of believing a relationship might heal. But also something careful, a watchfulness, a knowledge that one honest conversation was not the same as change. Change is slow, change is earned. Change happens in the small unobserved moments, the text that comes just to say hello, the question asked with no ulterior motive, the instinct redirected, the old pattern noticed and interrupted before it can run its course. We would have to see. But here is what I knew. Walking back to the kitchen to wash out the mugs, I had not caved. I had not apologized for my decision. I had not found some smaller, more comfortable version of my own needs, and presented that as a compromise so that everyone could relax again. I had been honest. I had been kind. I had held the line. And for the first time in what felt like years, I had sat across from my son and felt like his father, not his employee, not his convenience, not his safety net. His father. That was not nothing. That was, in fact, everything. January came cold and quiet. The automatic payments were gone, and with them went the constant low-level tension. I hadn't even fully noticed the end-of-month calculations, the bracing for the text that said sorry one more thing, the quiet diminishment of choosing the markdown bread again, and again, and again. I had money in my account that I had not pre-apportioned to someone else's life. That was a strange and new thing. I sat with it carefully, like something fragile. I signed up for a pottery class. I want you to know I'm saying that without irony or self-consciousness, because that's the kind of thing you stop letting yourself want when you've decided your life is about other people's needs. A Saturday morning class at a studio downtown, $85 for 6 weeks, and I almost didn't do it, because $85 felt extravagant for something that was only for me. I did it. The first session I sat at the wheel and made an absolute disaster of a lump of clay, and I laughed, actually laughed out loud in a room full of strangers, and it felt extraordinary. I called Rachel that night. I made something today. Yeah? Would you call me generous with the word asymmetrical, but I made it. She laughed. Good. Make more asymmetrical things. I intend to. Ryan texted 3 times in January, not asking for anything, just a photo of Jack losing a tooth, a note about a podcast he'd listened to that made him think of me, a question, genuine, just a question about how I was spending my winter. I answered all 3. Small things. But in the arithmetic of repair, small things are the currency. And I was learning, slowly, at 65 years old, something I should have understood much earlier, that the most important relationship I would ever have was not with my son, or my grandchildren, or even the memory of my wife. It was with myself, with the man who liked the slow pour-over coffee, who laughed at his own lopsided pottery, who had driven home in the dark on a December night, and made a quiet, private decision that changed everything. I was still learning who he was, but I was finally paying attention. The pottery class met every Saturday at 9 in the morning, and by the 3rd week, I had become the person who arrived first, not because I was eager, though I was, but because those 15 minutes before anyone else got there, when the studio was quiet and the clay was cool and the morning light came through without asking anything of me. Those 15 minutes had become something I protected, something I planned my week around. That was new. Planning my week around something I wanted rather than something someone else needed. February came. Then the first week of March, Ryan and I had fallen into a new rhythm, care, still fragile at the edges, but real. He called on Sundays, not perfect, but more often than not. And when he called, he asked questions that weren't setups for requests. How are you sleeping? Have you talked to Rachel lately? What's been good this week? I answered honestly. That was also new. Not reflexively saying fine and steering the conversation toward him, but actually answering, telling him that I'd had a hard Tuesday, because I drove past the diner Margaret and I used to go to on anniversaries, and had to sit in the parking lot for 10 minutes before I could drive again, telling him that the pottery class had given me something I couldn't quite name, but felt like oxygen. He listened. I'm not saying he was perfect. He wasn't. There were still moments when the old Ryan surfaced, moments when he'd shift the conversation to his problems with the efficiency of someone who'd been doing it for years without noticing. But then he'd catch himself. And the catching himself mattered. Melissa, I heard, was not handling the financial restructuring well. The Mercedes had been returned. I found this out not from Ryan but from Lily, who mentioned it on a Sunday afternoon when I'd had the grandkids for a few hours, actually planned, actually asked for, with actual advance notice. Mom's new car's a lot smaller. Is it? She says it's temporary. Things often are. Lily looked at me with those brown eyes. Grandpa, are you and Dad fighting? I thought about how to answer that carefully, the way you think about things you say to an 8-year-old, because 8-year-olds remember things said to them and carry them. Your dad and I are figuring some things out, grown-up things, but we're not fighting. He cried in the kitchen last week, did he? He said he was just tired. I pulled Lily close and hugged her, and didn't say what I was thinking, which was the tired was probably accurate, just not the whole story. But that conversation planted something in me, a small worry, not the kind that made me want to reverse course, I was past that, but the kind that made me pay attention. Because Ryan crying in the kitchen meant something was happening that he wasn't telling me, and for the first time, that worried me. Not because I felt responsible for fixing it, but because I genuinely cared what was wrong. That was different. That was the difference between the old dynamic and the new one. The difference between responding to guilt and responding to love. I found out what was happening 2 weeks later when Ryan called me on a Wednesday night, which was not our usual time. And his voice was different from the moment I picked up. "Dad, I need to tell you something. I'm here. Melissa and I are separating." I sat down, not because my legs gave out, they didn't, but because it felt like the right thing to do. Like the news required that kind of deliberateness. "Tell me." He was quiet for a moment, steadying himself. I heard him breathing. "It's been coming for a long time, you know that. You've probably known longer than I have." I suspected. "We went to see someone in January, a counselor. We tried for 2 months, and it's not that we didn't try, Dad. I want you to know we tried." "I believe you. But there's too much. There's too much that's broken between us, and we've both been pretending long enough that neither of us even knows what's real anymore." A pause. "She's going to stay with her sister for a while. I'm keeping the house, or trying to. I don't know if we can afford it. What do you need from me?" The question came out of me automatically, and the moment I heard myself say it, I felt a flicker of something old. The reflex, the resource mode, the immediate positioning of myself as the solution. But then I heard how he answered it, and something settled. "Nothing. I mean, I might need to talk a lot, I might call too much, but I'm not calling to ask for money, Dad. I just needed to tell you. I needed to hear your voice." I stayed on the phone with him for 2 hours that night. And here's what I didn't do. I didn't offer to cover the mortgage. I didn't say, "Whatever you need, I'm here for it." I didn't open the door to the old arrangement, because I understood now that opening that door, even with love, even with good intentions, would have taken something away from him, something he needed to find on his own. What I did do was listen, ask questions, remind him of the things he was capable of that he'd forgotten because life had been too comfortable for too long, tell him gently and plainly that falling apart for a while was allowed, and that falling apart didn't mean he wouldn't reassemble. When we hung up, I sat with the complex weight of it. My son's marriage was ending. My grandchildren were going to go through something hard. The life Ryan had built, even the parts I'd helped fund, the parts I'd enabled, was coming apart at the seams, and I could not fix it, and I would not try to fix it, and that was the most loving thing I had ever done for him. March moved forward. The separation became official. Melissa moved to her sister's place. Ryan kept the house, at least temporarily, and went back to work full-time for the first time in 6 years, a fact he delivered to me with a complicated mixture of pride and terror. I got a job. "Tell me." "Administrative coordinator at a medical group. It's not glamorous. It's a lot of scheduling and paperwork." "Is it yours?" A pause. "Yeah, it's mine." "Then it's glamorous." He laughed. A real laugh. I hadn't heard one in a while. The kids were adjusting, not easily, but kids adjust when the adults around them are honest and present and don't make them feel like the adjustment needs to be rushed. I told Lily and Jack that when things felt too big they could always call me. And they did. Jack especially, who called me 3 times in 1 week just to tell me what he'd had for lunch, which I understood was less about lunch, and more about needing to hear a voice that didn't sound worried. I bought a better coffee maker. I know that sounds trivial, but I'm including it because it was the kind of small, uncomplicated pleasure that I had been denying myself for years without consciously deciding to. And buying it felt like a declaration. I spent 40 minutes researching coffee makers. I chose one based on what I actually wanted, not what was on sale. I made a cup with it the first morning and sat at my kitchen table in the early light and drank it slowly and thought, "This is mine." The pottery class ended, and I signed up for the next session without hesitating. And then, in the middle of March, something happened that I had not seen coming. His name was Louis Hartman, and I met him on a Tuesday at the public library. I had gone in to return some books I'd started reading again. Actually reading, not just half reading before falling asleep. And I was standing in the return line when the man in front of me dropped half his stack on the floor, and we both bent to pick them up at the same time, and very nearly knocked heads. He grabbed a book. I grabbed a book. We stood up. "I'm so sorry. Please don't be. This is a regular occurrence." He was around my age, early 60s maybe, a round face, reading glasses pushed up into thinning gray hair, carrying more books than one person could reasonably read in any responsible time frame. "Are you researching something?" I asked. or just ambitious? He laughed. Both, usually. Louis. Frank. We ended up talking for 40 minutes in the library lobby, which is the kind of thing that does not happen when you have spent 2 years with your entire social life compressed into one person's needs. When you have been the helper and the resource and steady presence, there is no time left over for a 40-minute conversation with a stranger who makes you laugh about books. Louis was a retired school principal, widowed 4 years ago. He had 3 adult children spread across 3 different states, all of whom he loved and spoke to regularly, and none of whom he lived his life around. How do you do that? I asked him, and I heard how it sounded, too earnest, too raw, but I didn't take it back. He looked at me with the measured directness of a man who has spent decades reading people. You've been giving yourself away, haven't you? It wasn't a question. Is it that obvious to someone who did the same thing for the first 3 years after my wife died? Yes, we exchanged numbers in the library parking lot. He texted me before I'd even gotten home, which was a message that only said, "Tuesday coffee next week, I know a good place." I texted back, "Yes," before I second-guessed it. That Tuesday coffee became a regular thing. Louis was the kind of person who said exactly what he thought without cruelty, who could look at a situation and name it clearly, who had a low tolerance for self-deception, his own or anyone else's. "Tell me about your son," he said the second time we met. So I did. The condensed version, the one I'd gotten better at telling, the years of financial support, the Christmas night, the scissors, the cancellations, the phone call, the conversation on my couch. Louis listened without interrupting, which was a skill I'd come to deeply respect. "And where are you now?" he asked. "With him, somewhere new, something we haven't had before." I thought about how to say it accurately. "I think for the first time we might actually be becoming friends. Not just father and son, which sounds strange, maybe." That's not strange, that's honest. The father-son thing we had before was mostly me managing his life and him allowing it. He's going through a lot right now, the separation, the new job. And you're trying to be present without being his solution. Yes, that exactly. Louis was quiet for a moment, turning his coffee cup. "That's the hardest thing," he said finally. "Watching someone you love struggle with something you could technically fix and choosing not to because you know that fixing it would be the least loving thing you could do." Yes, that exactly. My youngest went through bankruptcy at 32. I had the money to prevent it. I didn't. He paused. He's 38 now and has built something genuinely his own. And when he talks about that period of his life, he doesn't talk about it like a failure. He talks about it like the thing that showed him what he was made of. I thought about that for a long time after we parted ways. What Ryan was made of. What he'd find out about himself, now that the safety net was gone. Not in a punitive way. Not as some kind of lesson I was engineering, but simply as the natural consequence of reality being real. I hoped he'd surprise himself. I thought he might. April brought the phone call that changed everything again. It was a Saturday, I remember, because I was just back from pottery class. Still had clay dried on. One hand that I'd missed when I washed up, and my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer. I had gotten better at not answering things out of obligation. But something made me pick up. "Is this Mr. Coleman?" "It is." "Mr. Coleman, my name is Gregory Marsh. I'm a financial advisor. I've been working with your son and his wife on some matters related to their separation. I was hoping you might be willing to have a brief conversation." I set down my bag very carefully. "About what?" "About some financial instruments that we've discovered in the course of reviewing the marital assets. There's a situation I think you should be aware of." My first instinct was to say I appreciate the call, but whatever Ryan and Melissa need financially is their business now, not mine, and I was proud of that instinct. But something in his voice, measured, serious, the specific tone of someone who has something genuinely difficult to say, made me stay on the line. "I'm listening." "Are you aware of a joint investment account in your name and your son's wife's name at First Meridian Bank?" A pause in my chest. Something cold. "There is no such account." Another pause on his end. "I see. Are you able to verify whether you may have signed any documents in 2020 or early 2021, possibly related to a financial matter with your son's household?" I sat down at the kitchen table. The ceramic pieces I'd been making were lined up on the shelf across from me, lopsided, colorful, genuinely mine. "What kind of documents?" "The account was opened in March of 2021, and lists you as a co-holder. It's carried approximately $40,000 in assets. Assets that Melissa is now attempting to include in the separation settlement as a marital asset. The number landed on me like a hand pressing down. That's impossible. I understand this may be startling. I want it to be clear, I'm not calling on Melissa's behalf, I'm calling on your son's behalf, with his permission. He brought this to my attention and was quite distressed about it. He had been unaware of the account until it surfaced in the asset review. I sat there for a long moment, holding the phone, feeling something clarify inside me, the way things do when the shock hasn't fully hit yet, and there's a brief, clean window of pure comprehension before the emotions arrive. In March of 2021, which was approximately 16 months into the financial arrangement, I had signed a stack of documents that Melissa had brought to the house one Sunday afternoon. She'd explained them quickly and confidently, the way people explain things when they're hoping you won't look too closely. Something about a financial protection structure, she'd said, something about making sure the money I was contributing was shielded. She'd had a folder, a pen, a pleasant, business-like manner. I had trusted my son's wife. I had signed. Mr. Coleman, I need a moment. Of course, take your time. I set the phone down on the table and looked at the ceramics on the shelf. Breathed. Picked the phone back up. This account, what does it contain? A mix of funds that appear to have been transferred incrementally over approximately 18 months. The account was structured in a way that would allow Melissa to access and transfer funds independently, despite it carrying your name. She was using my name on an account I didn't know existed. That is what the documents suggest. Yes. I said a word I generally do not say. Gregory Marsh was politely silent about it. What does Ryan know? He knows about the account. He's the one who flagged it to me. I'll be candid, he was very upset. He asked me to call you directly because he felt he couldn't make this call himself. Of all the things that had happened in the last 4 months, that particular fact, that Ryan had found this and immediately flagged it and brought it to a professional and asked them to tell me, that landed differently than the account itself. Where is he right now? I don't know, Mr. Coleman. I was asked to reach out by phone. Thank you for calling. There may be a need to. I'll need to consult my own attorney. I understand. Thank you. I hung up. I sat at the table. Outside a car went by. A neighbor's dog barked twice and stopped, and then I called Ryan. He picked up on the first ring. Neither of us spoke for a second. Dad, I just got off the phone with Gregory Marsh. I know, I asked him to call. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. When did you find out? Last week. He was doing the full asset inventory for the settlement and it came up, and I didn't even know what it was at first, and then he explained it, and I felt sick, Dad. I felt physically sick. How much did you know about what Melissa was doing with the money I sent? His voice when it came was smaller than I'd ever heard it. I knew she was managing it. I thought she was keeping track. I trusted her the same way you trusted. He stopped. I know how that sounds. It sounds true, actually. I know she was. I know Melissa has not been the person I thought she was, not for a while. But this is different. This is my name on an account I didn't know existed. Yes, that's not a mistake. Ryan, that's not bad financial management. That's someone using my name without my full understanding of what I was signing. I know that's a different category of problem. Silence. Then, I know that. And I need you to know that I am not defending her. I am not going to defend her. If you want to pursue this legally, I will back you up completely. I will give you every document I have. I want her to be held accountable for this. I closed my eyes. Here was the thing about that moment. The thing that I need you to understand if you want to understand what this period of my life actually felt like from the inside. I was not only angry, I was also, somewhere beneath the anger, deeply sad, because Melissa had done something dishonest, had used my trust, and my name, and my money in a way that was at minimum unethical, and possibly significantly worse than that. And that was real, and it needed to be dealt with. But I had also signed documents without reading them fully. I had trusted without verifying. I had made myself so determined to be the helpful one, the generous one, the one who didn't make things difficult, that I had signed my name to something I didn't understand because questioning it felt like a failure of generosity. The same thing that had made me the resource had also made me vulnerable to being used as one. I was angry at Melissa, but I also owed myself some honesty about my own role. I'm going to call an attorney, I said. Good. This doesn't mean I'm angry at you. A breath on the other end. Are you sure? I'm sure you didn't do this. You brought it to light when you found it, and that matters. It wasn't even a hard decision. His voice firmed up. The second I understood what I was looking at, I knew I had to tell you. It wasn't even a choice, Dad. You're my father. There it was. That sentence, simple, factual, and the most significant thing he had said to me in years. Not, you're useful, or you're the one I call when things break. Not, I didn't think you'd mind, or I knew you could handle it. You're my father. Like that was the thing that governed everything. Like it was enough of a reason by itself. Something I'd been holding for months, tight and controlled and carefully managed. Something in my chest let go. I know, I said. The attorney's name was Vanessa Ortiz, and she was exactly the person you want in your corner when someone has done something to you that is legal adjacent and morally clear, small, precise, with reading glasses on a chain and a manner that communicated she'd seen everything and was impressed by very little of it. I brought her every document I had. She spent 20 minutes looking through them and then looked up. She's good, I'll give her that. The language in the co-holder agreement is technically your consent, but it's buried and contextualized in a way that makes it clear it was designed not to be understood. Can we do anything? We have options. The question is which option serves you best. She set down her glasses. Your son is cooperating completely. That helps. Do you want to pursue this aggressively, or do you want to use it as leverage to ensure your name is cleanly removed from the asset, and you're compensated for anything that was drawn from it improperly? I want my name off of it. I want what's mine back, and I want her to understand that there are consequences for doing this to people. Vanessa looked at me. Something in her expression shifted, not surprise, but something like appreciation. We can do all three. The months that followed were neither fast nor simple. Legal things rarely are. There were documents and letters and phone calls and a mediation session in late May that I will not describe in full because it was exhausting and tedious, and also because Melissa's expression when she realized I had legal representation and her husband was sitting on my side of the table was something I will carry quietly for the rest of my life. I did not go in angry. I went in prepared. There is a difference. By June my name was removed from the account. A portion of the funds, not all of it, not a perfect accounting, but a real and meaningful amount was returned to me in the settlement. Melissa moved to Denver. I don't know why Denver. I didn't ask. And I found myself in the early weeks of July sitting with Louis at our usual coffee place on a Thursday morning, telling him the whole story from the beginning. And by the time I got to the mediation, he was shaking his head slowly, with that measured look of someone who has learned to be unsurprised by what people are capable of. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Actually feeling lighter," I said. "Strangely, genuinely lighter, not because it's over, because I handled it." I turned the coffee cup in my hands. Every step of it. I found the attorney, I understood the documents, I sat in that room, and I did not defer, and I did not apologize for knowing what I was owed. And I've never done that before, Louis. I have never once in my adult life walked into a room and simply expected to be taken seriously. Why not? Because I was always the one who made sure everyone else felt comfortable. The one who didn't take up too much space. The one who gave so much that there was no room left to also expect. Louis was quiet, and now I thought about it, genuinely thought, not just reached for a convenient answer. Now I think I'm learning to take up the space I actually occupy. Not more, not aggressively, just the space that's mine. He raised his coffee cup. To the space that's yours. I raised mine. Ryan and I had dinner the week after the settlement. Just the two of us, no kids, no agenda, a restaurant we used to go to when he was in his 20s, and we would talk for hours over pasta and bad wine. He was different in small ways that added up. He sat straighter. He ordered what he actually wanted instead of defaulting to the cheapest thing on the menu, which had been a habit from the years before Melissa, a young man's habit he'd lost somewhere in the marriage. He asked the server a question about the pasta without apologizing for asking. Small things. We talked about the settlement. He thanked me for not blaming him. I never blamed you. I know, but I blamed myself for a while. For what? For not seeing it sooner, for not asking more questions about the money. For letting you be what you were to us for so long without asking if that was okay. I looked at him across the table. You didn't invent the dynamic, Ryan. I participated in it too. I chose it every month for 2 years, but I benefited from it too sometimes. That's what I want too. He picked up his glass. Something in his face, open and young, and slightly scared in the way that meant he was being honest. How do we do that? We keep showing up honestly, without the transaction. He nodded. I can do that. I know you can. And I meant it. Not as a reassurance. Not as the kind of thing you say to end a conversation cleanly. I meant it. The way you mean something when you've watched a person begin to change and you've seen enough to believe the change is real. My son was becoming someone I genuinely liked, someone who didn't know yet how strong he was but was in the process of finding out. And I was becoming someone I'd almost forgotten, the man who made his own choices, who took up his own space, who loved his family without dissolving into it. I was 65 years old, and I was, in the most uncomfortable and necessary and ultimately extraordinary way, becoming myself. And the story wasn't over, not even close. Summer arrived the way summer always does in Ohio, suddenly, completely, without apology. And I was, for the first time in years, actually present for it. Not managing it from behind a kitchen window, not half noticing it between phone calls and bank transfers, and the low-grade anxiety of someone whose life belonged more to other people than to himself. I was present for it, the way I used to be present for things, before grief and obligation had compressed my world down to a single function. Louie and I had started walking in the mornings, 6:30 3 times a week, through the park 2 blocks from my house. It sounds small. It was enormous, because it was mine, a standing appointment with no purpose except movement and conversation, and the particular pleasure of being outside while the day was still cool and the world hadn't fully woken up yet. On a Wednesday morning in the second week of July, we were halfway through our usual loop when Louis said something that stopped me mid-step. "Have you thought about traveling?" "What do you mean?" "I mean traveling. Packing a bag and going somewhere that has nothing to do with anyone's needs but yours." I started walking again. Thought about it, honestly. Margaret and I talked about Portugal. The word came out with a small, complicated weight. Portugal, of all places. We never went. She got sick before we could plan it seriously. Louis looked at me. "Then go by yourself. Why not?" I almost listed the reasons, the logistics of solo travel, the expense, the strangeness of being alone in a foreign place, the guilt of spending money on myself at that scale. I heard those reasons line up in my head, and I heard how they sounded. "I don't know," I said instead. "That means you're considering it." I was considering it. I didn't book anything that day, but I looked things up that night. Flights, small hotels, what Lisbon looked like in September, when the summer crowds thinned. I had my laptop open on the kitchen table and a cup of tea going cold beside me, and I spent 2 hours reading about a city I'd never been to. And I felt something I recognized from a long time ago, excitement, simple, uncomplicated, nobody else's business. I didn't book anything that night either. But the window was open. The call came on a Friday morning, 3 weeks into July, while I was at the grocery store. Not Ryan this time. Lily. My granddaughter was 13 minutes into the call before I understood what was actually happening, because she opened with 3 minutes of completely normal conversation. How her summer was going, a book she was reading, a fight with a friend that had resolved. And I was answering normally, present and engaged, enjoying it the way I had learned to enjoy these calls, without the old layer of anxious helpfulness. And then her voice shifted. "Grandpa, can I tell you something? Always. Something's wrong with Dad." I stood very still in the cereal aisle. "Tell me." "He keeps saying he's fine but he's not eating right and he's up really late. And I heard him on the phone with someone last night and he was crying but he thought I was asleep, but I wasn't." "How long has this been going on?" "Like 2 weeks, maybe since Melissa told him about the house." "What about the house?" A pause, the kind a child makes when they're not sure if they're supposed to know something. "She wants to sell it. She needs her half of the money. Dad said he thought he had more time but—" Lily's voice wobbled slightly. "I don't want to move, Grandpa." I held the phone carefully. "Lily, sweetheart, I hear you, and I'm going to call your dad today." "Okay, you didn't do anything wrong telling me he's going to be mad." "He might be for a minute, but he won't stay mad. Your dad loves you." "I know." A pause. "I love you, Grandpa. I love you more." I stood in the cereal aisle for another minute after we hung up, hand on the phone, thinking, this was the moment, the kind of moment I had been preparing for without knowing it. The one where the old Frank and the new Frank would stand at a fork in the road, and I would have to choose consciously and clearly which one I was going to be. The old Frank would have gone straight to his bank account. I called Ryan instead. He picked up on the third ring, and I could hear immediately that Lily was right. The voice that said, "Hey, Dad," was thinner than usual, carefully held together. Lily called me. A long pause. Of course she did. Not angry, just tired. She was worried. She's a perceptive kid. I know, she's too perceptive sometimes. A breath. The house. Melissa wants to force a sale. Her attorney sent something last week. I thought Vanessa had protected me from this scenario, but apparently there's a timeline. He stopped. I'm handling it. I know you are. I'm not calling to fix it. Then why are you calling? Because my granddaughter is worried about her father and I love both of you, and I wanted to hear your voice. Silence. Dad? His voice fractured slightly at the edges. I don't know what to do. Tell me the situation, all of it. So he did. The for sale timeline, 60 days. The cost of buying Melissa out, which he couldn't manage on one salary this soon into a new job. The apartment he'd started looking at, which was fine, was genuinely fine, but that required saying out loud that they were leaving the house. And saying that out loud meant making it real. I listened to all of it. And then I said, what does Vanessa say? She says I have options, but they're all hard. Hard isn't the same as impossible. I know, and I have 60 days. Then you have time to figure out which hard option is the right one. That's not nothing. Another pause. I could feel him steadying. I hate this. I know. I hate that this is my life right now. I know, but Ryan, listen to me. You are 3 months into a job you've never done before. You're navigating a divorce, you're raising 2 kids, and you found the fraudulent account and handled it correctly. You are doing all of that at the same time. It doesn't feel like enough. It never does when you're in the middle of it. But from the outside it looks like someone who is figuring out what he's capable of. A long quiet moment. I really miss Mom sometimes. That one landed in a soft, bruised place. Me too. She would have known what to say. She would have said about 12 words and fixed the exact right thing and not made a big deal about it. He laughed, wet and genuine. Yeah, she would have. We talked for another 40 minutes. Not about solutions, about her, about Margaret, who we didn't talk about enough, whose absence had become a shared, unspoken thing rather than something we grieved together. We talked about a summer trip we'd taken when Ryan was 9, about the way she made his birthday cakes every year, precise, slightly architectural, nothing like what a person would call pretty, but always exactly what he'd asked for. When we hung up, I sat in my car in the grocery store parking lot for 5 minutes. Not sad, not exactly, more like full, like something had been empty for a long time and had just gotten some of what it needed. I hadn't offered money. I hadn't offered to solve the house situation. I hadn't made myself the answer. I had shown up as his father. And it had been enough. More than enough. It had been everything. 2 weeks later, Ryan found an apartment. He called me the night he signed the lease, and his voice was different from anything I'd heard from him in years. Not relieved exactly, not happy exactly, but something more solid than either, grounded. It's smaller, but it's ours. Tell me about it. 2 bedrooms. The kids will share, which Jack thinks is great, and Lily thinks is a personal injustice. Of course she does. There's a little yard. Not much, barely enough to call it a yard. But there's a tree. And Jack is already talking about a rope swing. That's the most important part, Dad. A pause. I signed the lease with my name, just my name, and it felt, I don't know how to explain it, like mine. Like something I earned. I thought about the pottery class, about the coffee maker, about Portugal, which I'd since looked up 17 more times. Yeah, I said. That's the feeling. I think I've been afraid of that feeling for a long time. A lot of people are. It comes with responsibility attached. When did you get so wise? I've always been wise, you just weren't paying attention. He laughed, a full, real, unguarded laugh. Fair. The move happened in the 3rd week of August. I showed up on moving day, not because he'd asked me to come and absorb the chaos, but because I'd offered specifically and he'd said yes specifically. And I'd brought lunch for everyone because I wanted to. And there is a difference between giving because you've been made to feel responsible, and giving because you genuinely love someone and it's your choice. I want you to understand that difference. Because it's the whole story. I spent 4 hours that day helping Jack arrange his half of the room, which required negotiation skills that I felt should be recognized formally. I helped Lily figure out how to hang her posters without damaging the rental walls. I ate bad pizza on the floor with my son and my grandchildren at 8 in the evening, and it was genuinely, uncomplicatedly good. When I left that night, Ryan walked me to my car. Thank you for today. I had a good time. You didn't have to. I wanted to, that's the point. I wanted to. He hugged me, real, full, not the distracted one-armed hug of someone already thinking about the next thing, a real hug. I love you, Dad, I love you more. He pulled back and looked at me in the dark of the parking lot. You seem different than you did a year ago. I am different. Good different, I think. He studied me for a moment with his head slightly tilted, a look I recognized, one that was purely Ryan. one he'd had since he was about 4 years old, and was trying to figure something out. Are you happy? I thought about it honestly, the way I've been trying to do everything. I'm getting there, which is more than I could have said 8 months ago. Good. He squeezed my arm. You deserve to get there. I drove home with the windows down and the radio on, and I sang along to something I didn't know the words to, and I didn't care at all. It was Lewis who finally pushed me to book the flight. September 2nd, a Tuesday. We were at the coffee place. Our usual spot, our usual table. A ritual that had become one of the fixed points of my week. The way the pottery class had and the morning walks had. The small, deliberate architecture of a life rebuilt from the inside out. I had my phone on the table. I'd been showing him the Lisbon pictures. Frank, I know. Book it. I'm thinking about you've been thinking for 2 months. Book it. I looked at the phone, at the photos of a city I'd never seen, that felt like a promise I'd made to Margaret and to myself, and to the version of me that existed before I got lost in someone else's needs. What if I hate it? What if I get there and I don't know what to do with myself and I spend the whole time wishing I was home? Then you come home, and you have a story about a trip you took by yourself at 65 years old, and you still get credit for going. That's not very comforting. It's very honest, what you keep telling me you want. I looked at him. You're not going to let this go. I am absolutely not going to let this go. I picked up the phone, opened the browser, went to the airline website. My hands were steady. I noticed that specifically. They didn't shake, didn't hesitate over the keys. Something in me had been decided about this for a while. I was just catching up to the decision. September 18th, 2 weeks away, 12 days in Lisbon. When the confirmation email landed in my inbox, Louis raised his coffee cup. There he is. Don't make me cry in public. I'm not making you do anything. You're crying because you did something brave. It's a plane ticket. It's a plane ticket and you know exactly what it is. I did know. It was the Portugal trip I'd never taken with Margaret. It was the markdown bread, and the generic cereal replaced with something chosen deliberately. It was December 23rd, and a midnight decision made in 12 minutes that had led, through a long and complicated and sometimes painful path, to this. A man alone, booking a trip for himself because he finally understood that he was worth the booking. I need to tell you what happened 10 days before I was supposed to leave. Because this story would not be complete without it. And because it was the moment, the real moment, even more than the night with the scissors, when I understood that everything had actually changed. Melissa called me. I didn't know her new number, so I picked up without knowing who it was, which meant I didn't have the luxury of deciding whether to answer. I just answered. Frank. I knew the voice immediately. Everything in my body went very still. Melissa. A pause, the particular pause of someone who has rehearsed something and is now finding that the rehearsed version doesn't fit. I wanted to call. I'm not calling to make excuses. Good, because I don't have patience for them. Another pause. I heard her process that. I know what I did with the account. I know how it looks. It looks exactly like what it is. She stopped again, started differently. When things got bad with the business, I panicked, and I made decisions that I knew were wrong while I was making them, and I made them anyway because I was scared, and I didn't know how else to. Melissa. My voice was very calm. I want you to know that I was not angry in the way that vibrates. I was calm in the way that is something more serious than anger. I'm going to stop you. Not because I don't believe you're sorry, but because the thing you did wasn't a mistake. You didn't accidentally put my name on an account. You did it on purpose, while I was giving money to your household every month, and you used my trust as a mechanism. Silence. And if your husband hadn't flagged it during the settlement, I might never have known. More silence. I'm not going to tell you what kind of person that makes you. You'll have to figure that out yourself, but I need you to understand something clearly. I paused. You used my grief. You used the 18 months after Margaret died, when I was desperate to feel useful and needed, and you built a financial structure on top of that grief without my knowledge. That is what I will not forgive, not quickly, maybe not ever. When she spoke again, her voice was different, smaller. I know, I hope you do, Frank. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix it. It doesn't, but I heard it. I hung up. I sat at the kitchen table for a while. My heart was not pounding the way I might have expected. My hands were flat on the table still, and I was breathing evenly, and outside the afternoon light was doing what late summer afternoon light does. I thought about Margaret. About what she would say. I thought she would say very little, and then go fix something, and that fixing things was her way of saying she loved me, and that I missed her in a way that would never fully stop, and that missing her had become something I could carry, rather than something that carried me. I called Rachel. Melissa called me. She called, she apologized. A pause that had several emotions moving through it in quick succession. Are you okay? I'm better than okay, actually. I think I needed her to say it, not because it changed anything, but because I got to be the one who heard it from a position of, I searched for the right word, solidity, like I was standing on something real and she was floating. Rachel was quiet for a moment. Dad, yeah, I'm really proud of you. I pressed my lips together, breathed. Mom would be proud of you too, she said. It wasn't a sentence I was expecting, and it moved through me like water through something dry, finding every crack. Don't make me cry, I said. Sorry, I'm going to Portugal in 10 days. A beat of silence. Then, wait, seriously? 12 days. I booked it 2 weeks ago. Dad, why didn't you? Because it was mine. I wanted it to be mine for a little while before I told anyone. She laughed, surprised and warm. Okay, fair. I wanted to feel it without it becoming a conversation. I get that. I completely get that. A pause. Is Louis going? He was invited. He said this one had to be mine. He's good. He's very good. We talked for a while longer. About Portugal, about her kids, about a trip she was planning, about what next year might look like, about all the space that had opened up inside my life now that I'd stopped filling it with other people's emergencies. Before we hung up, Rachel said, Hey Dad, yeah, I know the last year has been hard. A lot of it has been hard. A brief pause. But you seem like you again. I held those words for a moment. Like me again. Like the man Margaret had married. Like the person who had gotten lost somewhere in the grief and the giving, and the quiet erosion of 2 years of being someone's resource, rather than someone's father, someone's friend, someone's self. I am, I said. I think I finally am. The night before I left for Lisbon, I packed my own bag carefully, deliberately, just what I needed, and nothing extra. The way I'd always meant to travel and never quite had the room to in the life I used to live. Ryan called at 9. You packed? Almost. You have your passport, your medications? Ryan, I'm sorry, it feels strange. Good strange or bad strange? A pause. I could hear him smiling. Good strange. Definitely good strange. I have everything I need. I know you do. A comfortable quiet settled between us, the kind that only exists between people who have gotten past performing comfort for each other and arrived at the real thing. I'm proud of you, Dad. I almost deflected, almost said, oh, it's just a trip, or it's not a big deal, or any of the 100 small ways I had trained myself to make my own choices smaller so that other people could feel bigger. I didn't. Thank you, I said. I'm proud of myself. Another pause, softer this time. Mom would have loved this. You going by yourself. She would have worried about the flight. She would have looked up the airline safety record, and then printed out a map of Lisbon, even though I would have had my phone. He laughed. I laughed. And we stayed on the phone a little longer, in the particular warmth of loving someone and being loved back without condition, without transaction, without the weight of all the things we owed each other, or had taken, or had given without being asked. Just his voice, and my voice, and the memory of a woman who had loved us both and was gone, and the life that continued. I finished packing after we hung up, zipped the bag, set it by the door. I got into bed and turned off the light, and lay in the dark of my own room, in my own house, 65 years old, going to Portugal in the morning. I thought, Margaret, I'm going. And then I went to sleep. The plane landed in Lisbon at 6:47 in the morning, local time. I had not slept on the flight, not really. I had dozed for about 90 minutes somewhere over the Atlantic, and then woken up completely, heart steady, mind clear, and spent the remaining hours watching the dark ocean beneath the wing slowly give way to the first gray light of a European morning. I didn't mind. I wasn't tired the way I expected to be. I was something else, alert in the way you get when you understand that something is actually happening, that you are not watching someone else's life from a kitchen window, but living your own, in real time, with both feet on the floor. When the wheels touched down, I pressed my hand flat against my sternum for just a second. Margaret, I made it. Nobody saw me do it. Nobody needed to. The hotel was small, on a narrow street, in the Alfama district, and the woman at the front desk handed me a key, an actual key, not a card, and said something, in Portuguese that I didn't understand, and I said, Obrigado, which was one of the 4 words I had practiced, and she smiled like that was enough. My room was small, and had a window, and I set my bag on the bed and stood at that window for a full 2 minutes, not looking at anything specific, just breathing the air of a city I had never been to, that Margaret. And I had put on a list that life had never gotten around to reaching. My phone buzzed. A text from Ryan. Did you land? Are you there? I'm here. How is it? I thought about how to answer that. I typed, it's mine, that's how it is. 3 seconds later, he sent back a single heart. I put the phone in my pocket and went to find coffee. I want to tell you about the third day, because the third day was the day something shifted in a way I hadn't anticipated and couldn't have planned for. I had been moving through the city the way you move when you're alone and unhurried, stopping when something caught my attention, sitting in squares for longer than was strictly necessary, eating slowly, talking to no one in particular and everyone a little bit. I had found a bakery I liked. I had walked until my feet told me to stop, and then sat somewhere and rested without guilt. On the third morning I found myself in a small tiled cafe at a corner table, with an espresso and a notebook I'd bought at the airport, the kind with a soft cover, nothing fancy, and I was writing, not a journal exactly, not a record of what I'd done each day, more like a conversation with myself, the kind I'd been avoiding for 2 years because being busy had been easier than being honest. I was writing about Margaret, about the 39 years, about the things I hadn't let myself grieve fully, because grieving fully required stillness, and stillness had felt like drowning, about the way she made coffee every morning and how the absence of that sound, the specific, ordinary sound of her in the kitchen before I was fully awake, was still the sharpest part of losing her. Choice I had made after she died, the choice to fill the silence with Ryan's needs. Not because Ryan had forced me, he hadn't, not entirely, but because I had needed to be needed, because being needed meant I still had a place in the world, because grief, when it has no shape, will find whatever container you offer it, and I had offered mine to a dynamic that slowly, quietly consumed what was left of me. I wrote all of that in a notebook in a cafe in Lisbon, and when I was done, my coffee was cold, and I ordered another one and kept writing about forgiveness. Not the kind you perform for the other person's comfort, but the real kind, the kind that is less about them, and more about releasing yourself from the weight of the story. I wasn't sure I was fully there yet with Melissa. I was getting there with Ryan. I was most of the way there with myself, which had been the hardest one. A man at the next table, traveling alone the same way I was, with the specific, self-contained ease of someone who had made peace with his own company, caught my eye, and we did the small, acknowledging thing, not quite a smile, not quite a nod, but the mutual recognition of two people occupying their own lives without apology. I kept writing. I called Luis on day 5. It was evening there, early afternoon for him. You're alive. Very much so. Tell me everything. So I did. The bakery, the notebook, the cafe, the way the city felt old in a way that was comforting rather than heavy, like age was evidence of survival rather than decline. The walk I'd taken that morning along the river, which I hadn't planned and which had taken 3 hours, and which I had not once checked my phone during. Frank, you sound different. Do I? You sound like someone who is not monitoring the room for what everyone else needs. I laughed. That's very specific. You had this quality, not an unpleasant one, but a quality of always being slightly elsewhere, like part of your brain was perpetually running logistics for someone else. It's not there right now. I thought about that. Held it against what I knew about the last 2 years, the last 2 months, the last 5 days. I think I finally stopped, I said. Stopped what? Waiting for the next thing to need me. I think I've been waiting my whole adult life for the next thing to need me. And now I'm sitting in a city where no one knows my name, and I have no purpose except to be here, and it turns out... I paused. It turns out I'm enough of a reason. Louis was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice had something in it I'd heard rarely from him, something slightly undone. Do you know how long it takes most people to learn that? Too long. Most people never do. I looked out the window at the evening street. Someone was singing somewhere, not performing, just singing to himself. Margaret knew it, I said. She was the least complicated person I've ever known, in that specific way. She liked what she liked. She did what she did. She didn't apologize for taking up space. She sounds wonderful. She was ordinary, in all the most extraordinary ways. We stayed on the phone a while longer. At the end he said, "Come home changed." Already am. Day 8 was when it happened. I had gone to a small museum, the kind of place you find by wandering, not by planning, and I was in a room near the back, looking at something on the wall, when my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. Portuguese area code. I almost didn't answer. I answered. Mr. Coleman, this is Mr. Almeida's office. We had a cancellation for a walking tour you inquired about on Monday. I had completely forgotten I'd left my name. On Monday, in a moment of impulsive curiosity, I had stopped at a small desk near the museum entrance where someone was advertising guided walks through old neighborhoods. I had left my number without really thinking about it. Oh, yes, when? Tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock. I'll be there. The tour was 4 people. Me, a retired school teacher from Ohio named Barbara, a young couple from Brazil on their honeymoon. Our guide was a man in his early 70s named Rui, who had been born in the city, and knew it the way you only know places you've loved long enough to stop seeing them. He pointed at things I would have walked past. He told stories that had nothing to do with the guidebook version, and everything to do with what it had actually felt like to live through the history we were standing in. At one point he stopped in front of a building, and told us that it had been standing for 400 years, and had survived an earthquake that destroyed most of the city. When they rebuilt, he said, they did not try to restore what was. They built something new, something that kept the shape of the old city, but was made of different materials, stronger ones. Things that had learned from what broke. Barbara from Ohio looked at me, and we had one of those silent conversations that strangers have in the presence of something unexpectedly meaningful. I took no photos of that building. I didn't need to. It was already somewhere I wasn't going to forget. I came home on a Thursday. The flight landed at 4 in the afternoon. I drove myself home from the airport, and when I walked into my house, with Margaret's garden visible through the kitchen window, and the pottery pieces on the shelf, and the good coffee maker on the counter, I stood in the entryway for a moment, and felt something settle, not relief, not the release of someone who has been waiting to get back to real life, more like an arrival, like I had gone somewhere and returned, and both the going and the returning were part of the same complete thing. My phone was full of messages. I looked through them in order. Louis. Welcome back. Coffee Tuesday? You home? Call me. Jack. Grandpa, did you bring me anything? Followed 3 minutes later by, also I missed you. Ryan. 3 messages across the 12 days. The one when I landed, one in the middle that just said thinking of you today, and one that had come in that morning, the day I was flying home. I opened that one last. I've been thinking about something I want to say to you. Not over the phone. Can I come over this weekend? I texted back, Saturday morning, bring the kids. Saturday came gray and cool, the first real hint of fall. The kind of morning that smells like something ending and something beginning at the exact same time. I had made the slow coffee. I had put out the things children like to find in a grandfather's kitchen. I had been standing at the counter for exactly 4 minutes, when I heard the car in the driveway. Jack came through the door first, which was always Jack's way, move fast, ask questions later. He put his arms around me before he'd fully stopped moving. You smell different. I've been somewhere. You brought me something. I did. What is it? Hello first. He pulled back. Hello. What is it? Lily came in behind him, quieter, and hugged me in the way Lily always hugged, fully, both arms, face pressed against my shoulder for 1 second longer than strictly necessary. That child had more emotional intelligence than everyone else in this story combined, and she was 13 years old. Hi, Grandpa. Hi, my love. Ryan came in last, and he looked like himself, not the managed version, not the version that was performing capability for an audience, just Ryan, in jeans and an old sweatshirt, carrying a container that I recognized as one of mine, that he'd borrowed at some point, and apparently finally remembered to return. Your container. Thank you. Ray looked, the way he'd started doing since everything changed, the looking that was actually seeing rather than scanning for what he needed. You look good, Dad. I feel good. Portugal agrees with you. It did. I gave the kids the things I brought them, a hand-painted tile for Lily, which delighted her in the specific way of something she hadn't expected to care about but immediately did, and a small wooden boat for Jack that he held like it was something serious. They dispersed into the living room with the reliable independence of children who have been to their grandfather's house enough times to know where everything is. I heard the television click on, then click off, Jack trying the remote, then on again at a lower volume. Ryan sat at the kitchen table. I poured coffee and sat across from him. You said you had something to tell me. He wrapped both hands around the mug, looked at it for a second. I've been thinking a lot while you were gone, about everything this past year, about what it cost you, about what I cost you. Ryan, let me say it, please. I nodded. I have spent a lot of time since December thinking about the version of you I had, the one I created without realizing I was creating him, the one who was always available and never asked for anything and was just there like a utility, like something that ran in the background. He paused. I told myself it was just how our relationship worked, but the truth is, I made it work that way because it was convenient for me. And I never stopped to think about what it was doing to you, because stopping to think about that would have meant changing, and changing was hard. You've changed. I'm changing. It's different from done. A quick look up. I'm not saying this so you'll tell me I'm doing great. I'm saying it because you deserve to hear it plainly. And I have not been plain with you. Not ever, really. The kitchen was quiet. From the living room I could hear Jack explaining something to Lily, in the serious tone he used when he had strong feelings about a subject. The money, Ryan said. $94,000, Dad. We don't have to. I can't pay it back, not now, maybe not for a long time. But I want you to know that I know what it was and what it meant and what it cost you, not just financially. I know you bought markdown bread. His voice tightened. Lily said something once. She said, Grandpa always buys the cheap bread, and I thought nothing of it. I thought absolutely nothing of it. And now I think about it, and He stopped. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for what I took. And I'm sorry for how I made you feel. And I'm sorry it took me this long to see it. I looked at my son, 41 years old, new job, new apartment, a marriage that had ended and left behind the complicated rubble of a life that needed to be rebuilt from different materials, sitting in my kitchen on a Saturday morning, saying the things that needed to be said without softening them for his own comfort. I hear you, I said. I mean it. I know you do. Are we okay? I thought about the question. Really thought about it. Not the automatic, of course we are, that I would have said a year ago, reflexive and pacifying, the answer designed to make him comfortable rather than the one that was true. We're getting okay, I said, which is better than okay in the long run, because we're building it instead of pretending it. He held my eyes. That's good enough for now. Yes. He picked up his coffee. I picked up mine. From the living room Lily laughed at something, and Jack's voice rose in mock offense, and Ryan and I both turned toward the sound instinctively, the same reflex, father and son, both listening to the same children we loved. When we turned back to each other, something had eased between us, nothing dramatic, just the small, real shift of two people who have been through something hard together, and come out the other side still facing each other. Tell me about Lisbon, he said. So I did. October moved into November. The pottery class met every Saturday, and I had progressed from asymmetrical lumps to asymmetrical bowls, which my instructor said with a completely straight face, was significant progress. I believed her. Louis and I walked 3 times a week, and talked about everything and nothing, with the ease of a friendship that had arrived late but fully formed, the kind that makes you wonder how you managed without it. Rachel and her family came for Thanksgiving. It was the first Thanksgiving in 3 years that I had not funded, planned, and executed for someone else's household. I made a meal in my own home for the people who genuinely wanted to be there, and we ate it at my kitchen table, and it was the best Thanksgiving I'd had in recent memory. Ryan brought the kids in a pie he had made himself, slightly imperfect, the crust slightly too thick on one side, and set it on the counter with the particular pride of someone who has made something with his own hands. I followed the recipe this time, he said. Mostly. It's perfect. It's lopsided. Lopsided things have character, I've been learning that. He looked at the pottery pieces on the shelf and smiled. Lily ate 2 pieces of pie. Jack ate 3 and did not apologize for it. Rachel's kids and Ryan's kids reached that particular détente that cousins reach when they're left alone together long enough. The territory negotiations, the discovery of common ground, the sudden alliance that forms against the adults. After dinner, Rachel and I stood in the kitchen while everyone else migrated to the living room, and she poured us both a small amount of the good bourbon she'd brought, and we stood there in a comfortable quiet that only exists between people who share a past long enough to not need to explain everything. You doing okay, Dad? Real answer. Real answer. I thought about what real looked like, about Portugal and the notebook and the cafe and the city rebuilt from stronger materials, about the pottery class and Louis and Tuesday coffee and morning walks, and marked-down bread that I no longer bought, about the night with the scissors, and the 12 minutes, and the clean, complete feeling of a decision made from a place of self-knowledge instead of fear, about Margaret, whose absence was still the most present thing in my life, and who I was learning to carry differently, not as a wound, but as a weight that had become familiar. that had reshaped the way I moved through the world, that I would not trade because it was evidence of 39 years that had been genuinely, completely mine. Real, I said. I'm the best I've been since she died. She looked at her glass. Yeah, she said, I can see that. We stood there a while longer. Through the kitchen door I could hear the sounds of people I loved occupying my house without consuming it, filling it in the way that guests fill a space, present and then gone, leaving the house still mine when the door closes. That had been the thing all along, the thing I'd lost and found and had to learn the shape of all over again. My house was mine. My time was mine. My life, the strange, complicated, rebuilt from different materials life of a 65-year-old widower who had spent 2 years invisible and 12 months finding his way back, was mine. Not because no one else mattered, Ryan mattered, Lily and Jack mattered, Rachel mattered, the memory of Margaret mattered so deeply it was structural, load-bearing, woven into everything, but mattering to people is not the same as belonging to them. I had spent too long confusing those two things. And the confusion had cost me in money, in sleep, in markdown bread and midnight scissors, and a Christmas mug that I had since placed on the highest shelf in my kitchen, not as a symbol of pain but as a reminder, a small, slightly faded reminder, to never again let anyone convince me that my feelings were the expendable ones. I want to tell you one more thing, and then I'm going to let this story be done. In December, almost exactly 1 year after the night that changed everything, I got a card in the mail from Ryan, not a text, not a message, an actual card in an envelope, with my name in his handwriting, with a stamp, the kind of thing that requires deliberateness, the kind of thing you do when something matters enough to slow down for. Inside he had written maybe 6 sentences. I'm not going to read them all to you, because some things are private, even in a story this honest, but I'll tell you the last 2. You didn't give up on me. Even when you gave up on what we were. I understand now that those are different things, and that the second one saved us both. I read those 2 sentences 3 times, standing at the mailbox in my driveway in the December cold. Then I went inside, made the slow coffee, sat at the kitchen table, my table, in my kitchen, in the quiet of a Thursday morning that belonged entirely to me, and I thought, this is what it looks like when you stop being someone's answer and start being their father. When you stop being a resource and start being a person. When you take the long, uncomfortable, necessary path back to yourself, and discover that the people who were worth it found their way back too, not because you made it easy for them, but because you finally made it real. I had gone to Portugal. I had made lopsided pottery. I had walked through a city rebuilt from stronger materials, and understood something about myself that 400 years of history and one honest December night had been trying to teach me. I was not a safety net. I was not a utility. I was not the man who bought the markdown bread and calculated other people's expenses while his own life waited. I was Frank Coleman. I was 65 years old. I had loved a woman for 39 years and lost her and survived it. I had raised a son who was still becoming who he was supposed to be. I had a daughter who answered the phone with warmth, and a friend who walked beside me in the early morning, and a notebook full of honest things, and a shelf of lopsided, imperfect, entirely mine pieces of pottery. And I was finally, completely, without apology, the main character of my own life. Not because no one else mattered, but because I finally understood that I did.